Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to talk about what is happening with Europe and the United States. There is a further escalation. Donald Trump has now completely paused all military and financial aid to Ukraine. Let me repeat that. Donald Trump has paused all military and financial aid to Ukraine. This is going to have a very, very serious impact on essentially the war. And so it raises very serious questions. I think this move alone of Donald Trump to basically pause all military aid for Ukraine and put it under review. It could take 3 months. It could take longer than that. Basically, it will continue until Donald Trump gets what he wants, which is an immediate ceasefire. But it raises some very interesting questions. It raises questions about the future of the war itself. It raises questions about the future of Europe's role in the war. It raises questions about the future of US-Europe relations and also the future of NATO. And of course, and finally, the future of Zelensky. So 5 futures are at stake at the moment as a result of this one singular decision by Donald Trump with regards to US foreign policy towards Ukraine. I also think that this is an excellent opportunity, an excellent diplomatic opportunity for India. And the question remains whether India will be able to take advantage of it or not. If you all recall, I had hoped that India would play a much important role in the Middle East conflict between Israel and Palestine, but India chose to sell weapons to Israel and basically not play a major diplomatic role. This was an opportunity for Dr. Jaishankar to indulge in shuttle diplomacy and show how India could become a global peacemaker. India now has another opportunity, and I will talk about it towards the end of this video. So please watch the Khanversations in its entirety to basically examine the idea that I'm going to propose. So let's begin by talking about what Donald Trump's stopping of aid to Ukraine really means. So please, before that, subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. So So there is news all day. There was this news that Donald Trump was meeting with his foreign aides. He was talking with his teammates, and so there was going to be a very serious response to what happened. So basically, Donald Trump was responding to 2 things. One, Zelensky's basically encounter with Zelensky in the Oval Office, as a result of which he did not sign the minerals agreement, and basically Donald Trump kicked him out of the White House. And then he goes to England, and Starmer decides to host an anti-America, pro-Ukraine rally, creating a divide between Ukraine and the United States, and then Starmer playing grandstanding by talking about becoming a leader, stepping up and showing leadership and demanding that Europe play an important role. But in the end, all they came up with was that they would come up with a plan for ceasefire, thereby accepting Donald Trump's proposal to end the war. They never talked about a ceasefire and a plan for ceasefire while Joe Biden was president. All they talked about was more aid, more money, more weapons, all from America to Ukraine. And if you remember, there was no attempts by the Western countries to bring about any kind of a dialogue, and Biden never spoke with Putin in those 2.5, 3 years that the war has lasted. But Starmer and European leaders there's a lot of noise coming out. If you're watching some of the European channels, I like to watch DW from Germany and France 24 from France. I also watch BBC, Independent TV, ITV, I think. So there are a lot of intellectuals, scholars, ministers constantly basically trying to insult Donald Trump and talking about how Europe has to now replace. There's talk about how within 5 to 10 years, Europe can replace the United States, or rather will not need the United States. And they have the resources. After all, they are 10 times bigger than Russia when it comes to total GDP. But I think that this is going to come as a shock. They were hoping and planning that Europe and Ukraine, basically this was their plan. We will continue to insult Donald Trump, we'll continue to berate Donald Trump, and hope that the public opinion of liberals and Democrats in the United States will shame Donald Trump into providing aid to Ukraine. I think that was the plan that these guys were working on. And meanwhile, they would kind of step up and try to build some kind of a token European support for Ukraine, and basically get political advantage, and saying that, look, while Donald Trump is this horrible person, look, we Europeans are so great, we are standing up for democracy and freedom. Apparently that is what Ukraine has been fighting for all these years, so that people in India and China and in Ghana and in Kenya and in Uruguay have democracy. And that is what Ukraine is today fighting for. So, but the sudden cutting of aid, and if it cuts off from tomorrow, it's quite possible that Ukraine now has a small window, maybe a few weeks or a couple of months, of weapons that they have hoarded already and resources that they have. Zelensky said in X post that that Ukraine has money for the entire 2025, but I don't know whether they have weapons for the entire 2025. So they will continue fighting this, and there will be some token support from Europe. All the summit came up with was a $2.8 billion loan from Great Britain with lots of restrictions. It is the money taken out of Russian assets going to be loaned to Ukraine. I don't know who Ukraine will return that money to, Russia or Great Britain. Anyway, Great Britain grew by robbing other countries. They stole $44 trillion worth of wealth from India. So stealing $300 billion or less from Russia is no big deal. But they wanted Ukraine to buy only British-made weapons from Northern Ireland, about 5,000 missiles. So anyway, this is all Europe could come up with. Now they have to come up with something very serious, especially in terms of weapons. The question really, interestingly, is whether Donald Trump will sell weapons to Ukraine if Ukraine decides to defy his demand for an immediate ceasefire. So let's say that they seize the 350 or 325 billion dollars of Russian assets, which are frozen in Western institutions, and they want to buy American weapons with that so that the war may continue. It will be very interesting. I have no way of guessing in which direction Trump would go. It would be tempting for Trump to sell $100 billion of weapons. Additionally, it will create more jobs in the U.S., more prosperity for some rich arms dealers in the U.S., but it will also be a geopolitical failure for Trump, because the war would then continue endlessly. The second thing that is going to happen is this raises the question, really, the future of the war. Will it stop? Will Ukraine be under pressure to basically work towards a ceasefire? Will they immediately come back in the next few weeks and sign the mineral deal? He will not be invited to the White House. I think what might happen is some low-level American bureaucrat will travel to Ukraine and he will sign the documents there for him. If that happens, maybe some European leader will try to play some important role. So Macron or Starmer might host this event, and maybe J.D. Vance or for that matter, Rubio will go and get that signature. But then the real party begins with, and see whether Donald Trump can pressure Russia to come to the table and have a ceasefire. The second question really is, what is the role of Europe now? What is the future role of Europe in this war? Is Europe really going to say, okay, doesn't matter, no problem, we will raise the money, and whatever weapons we already have, we will share that with you, and if America doesn't sell the weapons, we will buy these weapons from China or India, and then we will give you those weapons, and you can continue fighting. I don't know whether India will sell weapons to Europe, which will be used on Russia, and I don't know whether China will do it, but there are other small manufacturers out there. Turkey is already selling its drones, which are being used by Ukraine, and who knows. but they can buy it on the black market and so on. So that's the question as to what is the future role of Europe without. The plan that Starmer came up with, in his own parliament, he was talking big that we will put planes in the air and boots on the ground. And when Nigel Farage asked him how many British troops he was going to put in Ukraine, he did not give a proper answer. In fact, it was clear that he was very irritated by that question. So this is the test. So now will Starmer move forward and act according to the needs of Ukraine, which are going to be immediate? You could say that Ukraine now has an emergency. So the third question is, what is the future of US-Europe relations? Will Europe now be more hostile to the US because it has cut aid to Ukraine? Or will Europe become more servile to the US, because are they all going to show up here next week begging Donald Trump to change his views? And I don't know. It will be interesting to see. So the third question, which is very interesting, is what is the role of the future relationship between the US and Europe on the issue of Ukraine? As far as America is concerned, the message was already sent clear from Riyadh that the US sees no role for Europe in the future of big decision making. The big decisions will be made between great superpowers, so US and Russia, US and China will decide. You can see right now I'm sharing a screenshot of the more powerful countries in the world, and the current ranking shows that the most powerful countries in the world are the US, Russia, China. This is military power: US, Russia, China, followed by India and South Korea. So these are the five. So in the top five countries, three are Asian powers. None of them are European powers who are going to stand up to Russia. So the question really is, what happens to US-Europe relations going forward? Are they going to beg for America's support or for America to rethink this position? Are they going to provide some kind of sop to US, such as saying, okay, we will force Zelensky to retire, we'll find a replacement for Zelensky, maybe the Speaker of the House, constitutionally, if Zelensky retires or resigns or dies, then the Speaker of the House during wartime automatically becomes president. They will not have elections. So is Donald Trump willing to accept something like that? I don't know how creative the Europeans are and how bold they are. So we'll see. This is a good test for how they are going to respond, and we'll see that tomorrow. So that is the third question. The fourth question is, what is the future of NATO? So there's been a lot of derogatory discussion about the United States, like I was saying, in European media. They were making fun of America and saying that America is not there when it really matters, even though America was with Ukraine for 3 years. So the question is America's commitment to NATO credible and reliable? And so if Europeans themselves feel that NATO is not reliable and credible, US presence in NATO is not. So there are two ideas that are floating around in Europe. One is to kick America out of NATO and bring in Ukraine, great, they can have it as far as I'm concerned. And the other is basically that NATO becomes very weak and there are no more expectations from NATO and the US. It may or may not exist. And Europe starts working on an alternative military for itself and try to develop its own alternative deterrence, which does not rely on US military power. And this is what Zelensky also recommended to the Europeans during the Munich conference. And now Starmer and Macron are also talking about it. Macron was talking about this since 2017, that Europe should have its own defense alternative. And there was talk about France and Germany having a unified army, and then Brexit happened, and we'll see what happens. One of the unnoticed, or say not widely noticed, consequence of this Ukraine debacle or Zelensky-Trump shout out in the White House, or shouting match in the White House, is the reverse of Brexit. So England is suddenly back as far as the security issues of Europe are concerned. And in fact, Starmer is basically trying to become the new US by taking over leadership of Europe on its behalf. So my fourth question is this: what is the future of NATO? And finally, does Zelensky have a future? That's the question. Does Zelensky himself have a future? If Europeans conclude that they cannot really step up, that they cannot raise the money that is required, if there are legal issues about seizing Russia's assets, and then eventually when they go to have a ceasefire negotiations, if they do not defeat Russia and force Russia, like the Versailles, to basically rebuild Ukraine, and if Russia doesn't agree to that, then they will have to return the $350 billion of Russian assets which are frozen. They will not only have to return it, but Russia could demand that they pay interest on it. So that's a very tricky situation for the Europeans. I'm wondering how the Europeans are going to decide whether they can really step up or not, because this is a real test. Yesterday, when Starmer was hosting the summit, it was hypothetical, so they could grandstand, but now it's real. I don't know whether they really thought that Trump would. I frankly did not expect that Donald Trump would cut off aid so quickly. I thought there would be some stupid statements or some kind of a resolution coming out. There is this commentary from Canada where Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the National Democratic Party, said that Donald Trump should be disinvited from G7. There will be no G7 without the US. I don't know why these days we have lots and lots of really stupid, dumb, brain-dead leaders out there. So Jagmeet Singh says he wants Canada to take the leadership of G7, I guess, and dump the United States. It's so funny. So I would be happy. I think that they should make some noises. Trudeau instantly said this was a very irresponsible statement. Trudeau at least realizes that that was an idiotic statement to make. But nevertheless, there are many European leaders who are making these comments. And I thought at some point, somebody in the Trump administration, either Trump or Hexit or J.D. Vance, would really get upset and they would put more financial pressure on Ukraine. But this is unbelievable. Apparently, Donald Trump is really seething with anger since Friday. And so this comes as a direct consequence of that. So these are the 5 questions that really come up immediately as a result of Donald Trump pausing aid to Ukraine. Number 1, what is the future of the war? Will it stop? Will it continue? Number 2, what is the future of Europe's role in the war? Will they replace the US? There are people who are talking about raising bonds and funds to do it, or not. The third question is what does it do to US European relations? Number 4, what does it do to the future of NATO? And number 5, what does it do to the future of Zelensky? So these are some of the questions I think that will be answered in the next few weeks. Now, where does India come in? There are several opportunities for India. In this, India is an important country. We noticed how last week, while Starmer was hosting an event to shore up Europe's leadership in world politics, the Ursula von der Leyen went to India with 26 other commissioners, a very unusual, unprecedented trip by European Union's commissioners. All 27 of them were in India. They were trying to basically deepen India and Europe's strategic partnership. They're talking about not just signing a free trade agreement by the end of the year, but also talking about building some kind of defense partnership. Europe has developed partnerships with Japan and South Korea, defense partnerships other than trading partnerships. As a result of that, some of the French have tried to patrol the Indo-Pacifics. They've sent their aircraft carriers and others, and apparently after Pete Hegseth became Secretary of Defense, the Americans have told the Europeans to get lost out of the Indo-Pacific. They don't want to see French aircraft carriers or ships in that region, which is very interesting. It hasn't got much attention here at the moment, but if you Google it, you will find that the Department of Defense has basically told the Europeans, we don't need you in the Indo-Pacific theater. And so what role can India really play? So one thing is obvious, which I don't think is going to happen, that India gets to sell weapons to Europe, which can be used in the war in Ukraine. It will undermine India's relationship with Russia. India is about to make a big decision of whether to go with Su-57s or F-35, which 5th generation fighter they want to buy, and they're not going to mess that whole scenario by selling some BrahMos or other weapons to Europe. But what is going to happen, what I suggest, is that in fact, not even leave these to Dr. Jaishankar. I think this is a great opportunity for Modi himself to step up and play the peacemaker. There's a joke going around that Putin has offered to negotiate between Zelensky and Donald Trump and to make peace between Ukraine and the U.S. I'm not recommending that for Narendra Modi. What I'm recommending really is that Narendra Modi step up and try to become a bridge between Europe and the US. So European Union was there last week. They obviously respect India. They value India. Of course, their mouth is watering at the prospects of having access, free trade access to 300 to 400 million Indians who more or less live like a first world lifestyle. There are two Indias. There are 1 billion Indians who can afford nothing. And then there are about 400 million Indians who live like Europeans and Americans do. So they are rich and prosperous and have lots of money and they can buy expensive things, expensive wine, expensive cars, which Europeans want to sell to them. So the Europeans are listening to them. And if you notice that in the past few months, the claim that Donald Trump and Narendra Modi are good friends still remains, while Donald Trump has definitely threatened to impose reciprocal tariffs on India. I think they kick in on Friday, in April. And there is also this whole talk about how in US is deporting Indians in a rather humiliating fashion, those who are caught here as illegal migrants. And there is also this talk that Donald Trump is unhappy with the huge trade deficit that India enjoys vis-a-vis the US. As of now, it's about $48 billion, and they want India to buy more American stuff. And that's where F-35 comes into the picture. Nevertheless, I think this is a good opportunity that Prime Minister Modi should step up, because I suspect that Saudi Arabia will move forward and do this, that they will host a summit with European leaders, with you, and maybe even invite Putin there and invite Donald Trump, and they will try to either have some kind of negotiations between Europe and the US, and also between US and Russia. So I think that India should at least step forward and try to say that, well, before Donald Trump starts negotiating with Putin, why not India play the peacemaker between Europe and the US before things go so out of hand that this partnership, which has been the backbone of the international order as it exists. I don't like the international order because only Western powers and their client states benefit from that, and any state which is not towing the line of the US and Europe gets heavily punished by this system. So it does not treat everybody equally. There are racial overtones to the way it treats. For example, when ICC issued an arrest warrant for Russia, it was praised. For Putin, it was praised. And the moment ICC issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, who was committing a genocide in Gaza, immediately the US tried to impose sanctions on ICC personnel and so on. So yes, the system is not, I mean, I will not cry if the system completely breaks down, but nevertheless, this is an opportunity for India to come and say, look, let's make peace between Europe and Ukraine, between Europe and the US. This is important to maintain the multilateral institutions that exist, IMF, World Bank, and the UN, and in the bargain also make a stronger case for a permanent membership for India in the UN Security Council. So I hope that you found this discussion interesting. Please stay plugged into Khanversations. I'm watching this issue very closely. So are my students. And for those of you who do want me to talk in Hindi, I will also be making commentaries in Hindi. I'm also speaking consistently, regularly on these issues on Satya Hindi, as well as the Time India Today's Hindi portals, especially the Lallan Tops, Duniadari, and mostly Duniadari. They also have another show that I sometimes appear on. And so So I will try to also keep up on Hindi, but I will definitely be commenting on these issues regularly, because I think this is going to shape the world. It will impact global trade. It will impact global economy. And if the relationship between the US and Europe really goes down, and US continues to pressure the rest of the world using tariffs, the tariffs on Canada and Mexico are going to kick in tomorrow. So we are going to see a lot of, shall we say, harakiri happening on the global stage. The global economy could shrink by close to 10%, and that will really, really hurt developing nations and push their agenda to become developed countries way behind. So anyway, so I hope you found some of my comments thoughtful. So please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon. Do press it, because then you will get notifications of my future videos, and of course share this with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan, and for those who are in India and watching this show, all the best to the Indian cricket team, which is playing the semi-finals of the Champions Trophy in a few hours, in about 5.5 hours from now, in Dubai against Australia. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I hope someone gives a lot of samosas for breakfast to Travis Head, if you know what I mean. So anyway, take care. If you have not subscribed to Khanversations, please subscribe. Bye.